So, in this video, we will see some reaction against British rule before revolt of 1857. We are calling it early reaction, early revolts before 1857. You all know that 1857 revolt was the first organized, right, or the major reaction. But before that also we are getting some example of popular mobilization. We are getting some example of some local disturbances, right. So, what kind of term we are getting, right. So, what I said, so what would be the heading for us, right, the early reaction, and I told you that the major reaction was 1857 revolt. But before 1857, you will see many reaction, right. The reaction, you can consider it as a civil rebellion. You can consider some of them as popular movement. We can use the word popular movements also. Some of them, they were the tribal reaction, tribal revolts, right. So, you will see that before 1857, right, different example, a number of popular mobilization, revolts, mutinies, right, against foreign rule. Only thing you have to remember that what was the nature of this reaction, right, local, right, localized, local. So, they were local disturbances, they were local disturbances, they were suppressed, they were managed properly, right. So, they could not create major challenge, but they always disturbed British rule. Just after the foundation of British rule after 1757, continuously you will see that there was development, and the major reaction was, right, major reaction was a revolt of 1857. Is it fine? We can consider it as local disturbances before 1857, you can call it early revolts before 1857, right. They were local, they were regional, they were suppressed, they lacked, right, what kind of sense, that kind of national sense. They were actually against the local problem, the immediate problem, right, done. So, sometime, right, in the preliminary examination, even in the main examination also, they are asking question related to these example. And believe me, it is not very popular, these areas are not very popular. We generally avoid, ignore these movement, but you will gradually realize that these are very powerful, these are very important reaction, right, fine. So, what we will do, we will take up some example of Eastern India, as you all know that they established their rule first in Eastern India, and then Western India, South also, right. You will see many example, and at least name of those reaction, area of those reaction you should remember. 2-3 of them are very popular. So, we will go for details, right. Earlier those details were not available. So, you will not see those details in your popular book like Bipin Chandra or Spectrum, but gradually subaltern schools, right, the historian of subaltern school, they started adding facts. I am not trying to add all those facts here, of course, for general studies it is not required, but I am highlighting those areas, so, right. Is it okay? Fine. Okay. So, now we are getting, we are taking some examples of these early disturbance or the early reaction against the British rule. Now, the first, so we will starting with the Eastern India, and then we will gradually moving to the different area, right, fine. So, first major reaction in the early reaction, first major reaction that started in 1770s only in Bengal, right, was what you call sannyasi revolt, right, sannyasi, we are calling it the sannyasi revolt. Have you heard about it? Sannyasi revolt? Because our textbook never elaborated this kind of revolt earlier. Now we are adding it. So the first major example, right, in this early reaction is sannyasi revolt, right, when it is started 1770s, where in Bengal, but now modern day our, you can say Bengal and Odisha, right, Odisha, some part of Odisha also you can associate, right. So sannyasi revolt, right. Now sannyasi revolt, you can mention first point that it was described. So these 2 points, sannyasi revolt in 1770s, where in Bengal, then it was described by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Bankim Chand Chatterjee, right, in his book Anand Math. Anand Math, in his book Anand Math. Fine. So they can ask you this question: who discussed this or who mentioned this, right, this unique revolt called sannyasi revolt? So Bankim Chand Chatterjee in his book Anand Math described this sannyasi revolt, right. So it is called sannyasi. Why? Because it was started by, right, it was started by a group of wandering sannyasi, Fine. So sannyasi revolt, it started in 1770s, and we can add that during the 1770s, when the British established their stronghold, in Bengal region, what they did? They took away as tax, they started collecting tax, whatever little the people of Bengal, the peasants or the landlords had, leaving them to die even in starvation. So nothing left, right. So in 1770s, Bengal faced a major problem, right, and that created the background for this sannyasi revolt. Fine. So they took away everything as a tax, nothing left in the hands of people of Bengal, peasants, even some small landlords, right. They had nothing, right. So everything taken away by the colonial rule, and it was a new thing for them, right, and they were draining. So this kind of, right, you can say the problem faced by the people of Bengal. Now, so why this sannyasi revolt? If they ask you, why this sannyasi revolt? So number one reason was that now there was nothing left, and therefore there was no donation to the sannyasis, Sannyasis were not getting anything now, because there was nothing for, you can say, for donation. And what they started doing, these sannyasis, wandering monks, what they started doing? They started slaughtering the British. So, why this sannyasi revolt? Because of this economic problem. They had nothing to donate, and therefore sannyasis were angry. They realized the problem, that British, they are responsible for this problem, their problem. Then second, why sannyasi revolt? Because you can say the condition, what you call famine like condition, famine of 70-70. This also prepared the background for sannyasi revolt, right? Famine of 1770. Famine of 1770 also prepared the background, right? So, exploitation of the people of the region, exploitation of the people of the region, right, by the British, even during this condition, famine condition, even during this condition, right, angered them, further angered them. So, why sannyasi revolt? Donation not coming. They were also angered by this exploitation by the British during this famine period. Then the third reason mentioned is that there was restrictions imposed on visits to holy places. They could not tolerate this kind of restrictions. Who are you to restrict us, right? That kind of question asked. So, restrictions imposed on visits to holy places also angered them, created problem for them. So, they reacted. Fine. So, they reacted, right? And what we can remember, that they started, right, they started using the slogan Vande Mataram. This is important. What was the slogan of these sannyasi? In 1770s, I am not talking about Swadeshi revolt, right, of 20th century. They are doing it in 18th century, believe it, right? Can you believe it? So, Vande Mataram was the slogan used, right? Vande Mataram, sometimes they were using Om Vande Mataram, that was the slogan used. Then we can mention that Warren Hastings was disturbed. Warren Hastings, he disturbed, he wanted to take action against these naked, right, sadhus. So, Warren Hastings in his letters mentioned naked sadhus, and therefore, some historians say that probably Naga sadhus also participated in this reaction. Naga sadhus also participated in this reaction. So, Warren Hastings was so disturbed by this reaction that military action is started against them. Military action is started against them, and a force commanded by Captain Stewart and Captain Jones, tried to contain them, tried to check them, right. But they started, sadhus or sannyasis or fakirs, or sannyasis, sometimes they were called sadhu or the fakirs, they started plundering British held villages. villages and properties. British held villages and properties. They started plundering it, right, plundering it. So, sadhus, fakirs, they started plundering those British held villages and properties, right. They started looting or plundering the British treasury. They started looting or plundering the British treasury, right. And what is interesting here is that these sadhus, these sannyasis, they started getting support, right, from local people. They started getting support from local people. They even started getting support from jamindars of this area, jamindars of this area, jamindars of this area. Fine. So, sannyasi revolt of 1770s in Bengal was ignored by earlier historians, right, traditional historians, but now it was highlighted, and in the coming examination this kind of question can be asked, right. So, sannyasi revolt in eastern India was probably the first, right, reaction, right, first reaction, and you can see how effective they were. It disturbed Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings had to take up military action, and finally these sannyasis, right, they were controlled, right. So, they lost momentum. Fine. So, this sannyasi revolt, of course, some religious orientation was also there, but I tried to highlight not the religious aspect, but how they were disturbed by the colonial rule. So, sannyasi revolt was essentially against, right, the exploitation of colonial rule. Now, second example, this is the first example, right, in eastern India. The second example in eastern India was what you call Pagalpanthi revolt. Pagalpanthi revolt. This kind of revolt, as I mentioned, that not very popular, but there is a tendency to ask, right, and probably in the coming examination they would be asked, right. So, Pagalpanthi revolt. So, Pagalpanthis, we can add Pagalpanthis also, right, in Bengal. Pagalpanthi was a semi-religious sect, semi-religious sect, Pagalpanthi, founded by Karam Shah. Pagalpanthi revolt in Bengal, right, semi-religious sect founded by Karam Shah, and after Karam Shah, a very important name, Tipu. This Tipu is different from your Mysore Tipu, right. So, Tipu, successor or the son of Karam Shah, he also reacted. He captured some area in 1825 and he assumed what? Royal power. He took up royal power. So, this Tipu is from Bengal, this you have to remember, this Tipu is not from Mysore. So, Pagalpanthi revolt, what they can give you? They can give you a matching test, Pagalpanthi revolt, you have to match with Tipu, you have to match it with the Karam Shah. Tipu is more popular, Tipu is more important. So, Pagalpanthi revolt. So, semi-religious sect and they were disturbed by, right, you can say of course the economic policy. See, religion, of course you can see the influence, but it was primarily religion, no, because you can add here, otherwise it would be confusing. We can add that the Tipu took up the cause, Tipu took up, right, the cause of the tenants, took up the cause of the tenants also against oppression of Jamindar, took up the cause of the tenants also against oppression of Jamindar. So, Pagal Panthi revolt you have to remember. Fine. Then the third example in eastern India, you have the Farazi revolt, Farazis, Farais, Farazis revolt, Farazis revolt, right, Farazis, Far, right, Farai, right, Farazis revolt. Fine. Who were these Farajis? They were the followers of Farajis, they were the followers of Muslim sect founded by Haji Sariyatullah, Haji Sariyatullah, Haji Sariyatullah of Faridpur in eastern Bengal. Farajis, they were the followers of Haji Sariyatullah of Faridpur in eastern Bengal. And Sariyatullah's son Dadu Mian, right, Faraji's movement was mainly led by Dadu Mian. So, this name you cannot forget, Dadu Mian, Sariyatullah's son Dadu Mian. He started leading this movement. He wanted to expel the British intruders from Bengal. He wanted to expel the British intruders from Bengal. They also took up the cause of the tenants. They also took up the cause of the tenants against the exploitation of the jamindars. Right. So, Dadu Mian led the movement, right, 1830s onward. Dadu Mian, Farazi movement, and later this Farazi movement became the part of what you call Wahhabi movement. Wahhabi movement. So, the most of the Farajis joined the ranks of Wahhabis. Right. Now, what is Wahhabi movement? Wahhabi movement, we can mention Wahhabi movement, right. You can say the leader of this Wahhabi movement, was Sayyid Ahmad of Rai Bareli, Sayyid Ahmad of Rai Bareli, UP, Bareilly, right, and it was influenced by this, you can say Wahhabi movement was influenced by the teaching of Abdul Wahab. Abdul Wahab, right, Wahab of Arabia. In India, Sayyid Ahmad was the leader. He was influenced by Abdul Wahid of Arabia in 18th century, right. So, Wahhabi movement in, you can say 18th, 19th century, right. So, Abdul Wahab of Arabia, they were influenced, and they were also influenced by a saint of Delhi, right, Shah Waliullah, Shah Waliullah, Shah Waliullah, Wahhabi movement, right. So, Wahhabi movement, why we should prepare, not because of their nationalistic tone, they were primarily revivalistic. So, it was a revivalistic movement, no doubt about it, and right. So, their aim was, right, to convert, you can say Darul Harb, right, into, you can say the world of Kafirs, the world of Kafir, into Darul Islam. Darul Islam. So, it was primarily a revivalistic movement, no doubt about it, and their aim was to convert Darul Harb into Darul Islam, and their base was mainly right the Punjab area, and initially they were against the Sikh kingdom, they were against the Sikh kingdom of Punjab, they were against the Sikh kingdom of Punjab, and after the, you can say, incorporation of Punjab into the East India Company's territory, right, in 1849. So, before 1849 they were against Sikh, after they were against, right, the British, they were against British. Fine. So, Wahhabi movement, and always remember, when they were against British, they created problem for the British, and therefore, it is considered as, Wahhabi movement is considered as the most serious and, you can say, most planned, most serious and most planned challenge to British supremacy in India. So, they challenged British rule in 1840s, 1850s and 1860s. Even after revolt of 1857, Wahhabis continued, they created problem for them, and therefore, right, the British rulers, they viewed Wahhabis, they viewed Wahhabis as, right, as the potential danger, right, danger. And in 1860s, you will see that the government launched, right, you can say, multi-pronged attack. 1860s, British government launched multi-pronged attack, right, and even military operations on Wahhabis, So, there were many trial you will see. Most of them were arrested, case of sedition registered against them. So, they created difficulties, problem for the British Empire, no doubt about it, right. So, Wahhabis, so they played important role before 1857, they played important role even after 1857, right. And some scholars suggest that they were the bigger threat than the revolt of 1857, right, for the British rule. But what we can always believe, that, as I indicated, that the nature of this Wahhabi movement was revivalistic, and at no stage, right, it assumed the character of a nationalist movement. It was anti-British, but it never assumed the character of nationalist movement, right. So, Wahhabi movement. I added Wahhabi movement, so that now you know how Farzis joined Wahhabis rank. So, I mentioned some early reaction in Eastern India, major reaction first, Sannyasi revolt, Pagalpanthi revolt, Farzi revolt, and then I came to, you can say, not Eastern India, the western part. Why? Because it was connected with Farzi, you can say, revolt. Is it fine? Now, in Eastern India, there were some reaction by tribal, some reaction by some, you can say, small players, localized, but they also established the tradition of local resistance. For example, we can add that in 1760s in Bengal, there was Chuar rebellion, tribal Chuar rebellion, right. I would be adding some more dimension of this tribal reaction in a separate heading, in a separate video, you will see that, right. But here also I want to mention some important resistance against the British rule. So, Chuar rebellion 1760s, then you will see the Ho rebellion, Hos, Ho's, right, in Ho they reacted in 1820s, 30s. Then there was coal reaction, coal rising of Chota Nagpur, coal rising in 1830s, coal rising in 1830s, and the coal rebels killed around 1000 outsiders, coal rising. Then in 1830s there was what you call very popular a home revolt. A home revolt, they are asking this a home revolt of Assam, a home revolt, right. So why this a home revolt? Because the attempt of the English, why this a home revolt? We can add a home revolt in 1830s, that the attempt of the English to incorporate the territory of Ahoms, the territory of the Ahoms sparked of a rebellion, and Ahoms proclaimed Gomadhar Komar, Ahoms proclaimed Gomadhar Komar as their king, and they reacted. So 1828, 29, 30, 31, 32. So this period is related to Ahom period or Ahom revolt, period of Ahom revolt. Fine. So these all are the example of early reaction against British rule before 1857. Then in Eastern India, right, you can mention Khasi rising also, right, in the Jaintia hills, Khasi hills, modern Jaintia Garo hills, Meghalaya. So they also reacted, right. Then after you can say this Khasi, you can in the Odisha there was a very popular reaction, and it is in news also, what you call Paika rebellion of 1817 Odisha. So there is a proposal to recognize it as the first organized reaction against British rule. Paika rebellion, you should remember this, Paika, right. So this is also one example of early resistance. Then after Paika, we can mention, right, in the Eastern India, very popular, probably the most popular reaction, it is called Santhal reaction, Santhal revolt, Santhal reaction in the Rajmahal hills, right, Rajmahal hills, very popular for examination point of view, most important, Santhal 1855, right, and this area was called what? Daman-e Koh, right, and Chand Bhairav Sidho Kanhu, Chand Bhairav Sidho Kanhu. These are some important names as leaders of Santhal revolt, right. So Santhal revolt is the most important, 1855, remember this. I would be elaborating it again in, right, the tribal reaction in a separate video, but right, you should remember 1855 Santhal revolt. There it is also called what? It is also called Hool, Santhal Hool. There is a tendency to ask this term Hool is associated with, right, Hool, Santhal. Then They were mainly against the, you can say, the revenue settlement imposed in this area, and they were against Dikus, outsiders, Dikus, outsider, Santhal. But they were brutally crushed, suppressed, brutally crushed, and many journalists narrated the heroism of Santhal. They behaved right like hero Santhals. They motivated our nationalism, right, motivated our nationalist Santhals. And after Santhal revolt, it is said that the Santhal Pargana Tenancy Act came into being. Santhal Pargana Tenancy Act came into being. Fine. So, these are some very important early reaction in eastern India, but in western India also you will see in western India also you will see a reaction against the British rule, right, like for example like the Bhil uprising, the Bhil rising, it started after 1817, continued for 30-40 years, 1817 Bhil rising, then Koli rising, Kolis, right. Then in the Kutch and the Kathiawar area also, in the Kutch and Kathiawar area also there was a reaction in 1820s, right. So, you will see in the western India also there were reaction. For your examination when you are elaborating it, so you can give example in different area, Bhil, Koli, Kutch and Kathiawar. Then there was a rising, right, you can say in 1820s called Waghera rising, Waghera rising in 1820s in the western area. Then there was a Surat salt agitation, Surat salt agitation, this is right ignored, but this is very important, Surat salt agitation in 1840s, right, salt agitation because of the rising salt duty. So, this is also important, you remember this Surat salt agitation. These are right not highlighted example, but when you will see UPSC questions, right, they have asked this kind of question also, Surat salt agitation, and question would be very simple. You have to right no, you can say the match, or you have to arrange them in an order like that. Then you have in western India you have Ramosi rising in western India, in the western Ghat area in the 1820s it is started, Ramosis. Then you have Kolhapuri or Satwandi revolt in 1840s, Kolhapuri and Satwandi, right, revolt, Savantwadi revolt, Kolhapur, right, Kolhapur revolt you can call it, Kolhapur revolt you can call it, or Savantwadi revolt, it was in 1840s, right. So, these revolts, not you can say initial revolts not only in the eastern India, but also in the western India, right, this we have to remember. Then even south was not, you can say, peaceful, south also reacted. You will see revolts before 1857 even in the South India, south also in the 1790s onward you will see South India some reaction, like for example revolt of Raja of Vijayanagaram. So, in 1790s you will see. Then you will see that the Polygar revolt, polygars of Dindugal, Dindigal, right, or Malabar, they also reacted, right. And then the very popular 1805, a Diwan of Travancore, Velu Thampi, Velu Thampi also reacted. This is very popular, very important, 1805, when Wellesley imposed a subsidiary alliance. Diwan of Travancore, Velu Thampi also reacted. Just I am giving you some idea, not going into details, but otherwise it would be, right, you can say a collection of facts only, right. So, south, west, east, they faced problem, different problem, right. And right, even in the northwest also I told you that Wahhabi always created problem. What we can always remember, as you all know, that revolt of 1857 was a sepoy reaction, right. It is considered as the sepoy mutiny. But before 1857 also, there are many examples of sepoy mutiny. Like for example, we can add that before 1857 also, right, there are many examples of sepoy mutiny. Like the first example of sepoy mutiny is 1764. First example of sepoy mutiny, 1764. What happened in 1764? A battalion of Munro's army, right, they left the British army and joined the Mir Qasim. So, 1764 is the first example of sepoy revolt. After that, in 1806, very popular in South India, Vellore mutiny, sepoy mutiny. You can remember it, 1806, this can be asked, right, Vellore mutiny, 1806, right, Vellore mutiny in South India. It was a protest against interference in the social and religious practices of the sepoys, right. So, Vellore mutiny, it is very important sepoy mutiny, and they unfurled the flag of the ruler of Mysore. Then after Vellore mutiny, you can mention that in 1824 again sepoy reacted, sepoy of 47th Native Infantry reacted, right, because they were not ready to go to Burma. So, 47th Native Infantry, 1824. So, you will see that sepoy mutiny continued, and after that you will see in 1830s, 1840s, sepoy mutiny reacted. You have many examples, right, right. So, in 1844 they were not ready to go to Sindh, right, and then in 1849 also, 1849-50 also, there was reaction, sepoy reaction in Punjab, popularly called Govindgarh mutiny, Govindgarh mutiny. So, these are some reaction among you can say by the sepoy also, Indian soldier also, against the British rule. Fine. So, now through these examples I try to convince you that revolt of 1857 was probably the most or the first major reaction, but before revolt of 1857, right, in east, in west, in south, and then among the sepoy also, there are many examples of reaction, right. So, for preliminary examination and even for the main examination, these examples would be relevant. Thanks a lot.